CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Welcome back to CMMS Radio. The man on screen is Mark Kingkade. He is with weights, but you also got to know something, and I don't screw around with this at all. This guy is a real deal pro. He's been in the trenches. He's put a lot of time in the industry. And what I mean by that when I say real deal pros, it's somebody that gets it. And I don't do that as a virtue signal. I want people talking to and learning from people that actually understand this stuff. I am not your guru. I am a facilitator. CMMS Radio is about computerized maintenance management, but focus on the two M's in the middle, maintenance management. I want someone like Mark to talk to you in a plain way about what's real. None of this fancy, shiny stuff. None of these empty promises of tomorrow. We're not looking to smell any unicorn farts. We want to get real about this. Mark Kingkade, welcome to CMMS Radio, my friend.
Thanks. Glad to be here. I'm psyched every time I get to talk to you. I get excited because, like you say, it's all about educating the people, and somebody's got to do it. No one's an expert in everything, but when you can bring the experts together and help those guys educate the younger people coming on board, or even educate some of the older guys that aren't doing it right, that's always a good thing.
Damn right. It's what's really interesting. And I'm always, especially lately, talking about this idea that a lot of us, because I'm in a way part of all of us, certainly not a CMRP, certainly not the kind of maintenance experts that I get the honor to speak with and learn from and talk to, but we're supposed to be working together to identify and solution problems. We're supposed to be chasing outcomes. Now, there's dollars and cents and all that kind of stuff involved, but I kind of like to clear that away unless you're talking about helping your clients achieve those dollars and cents, and that's how you make your way. That I am a fan of. You're allowed to print as much money as you want, provided you're doing it right. For me, that's about the customer, because if we don't have customers that are thriving and driving and growing and improving, and I really mean this, then you're doing something wrong. You're doing a disservice, and I don't care about your stock price. I want to hear more. We were just talking a little bit about your revised and new role, because it has a lot to do with this concept of boots on the ground, going where it's happening and actually building people's knowledge and how to get the right experience with what you actually do. Can you talk to us about that new role and what it really entails? Kind of like what you were telling me a little while ago.
Yeah. Well, what happened was everybody that's on LinkedIn and stuff, they're seeing all this information going out there, and everybody's poking fun at sensors that are being installed wrong in the wrong places on a fan guard cover, on a control box, or on the lifting lug or something like that. Well, Waits has decided that there's enough opportunity, and we have enough young people coming into the business to move me into a position where I work with the install teams that we have. We've got a group of guys that's their sole purpose in life right now, is going out installing sensors and setting up systems and stuff. And a lot of them don't have 30, 40 years experience working on the equipment. They haven't been in maintenance and things like that. So my role now is to educate these younger guys coming in as far as, here's a centrifugal compressor, here's a screw compressor, here's the differences between these, here's a recip compressor, here's a centrifugal pump, here's a gear pump, so on and so forth. Help them educate and learn the different types of equipment, and then look at where we're installing the sensors and make sure we're putting the sensors as in the best possible location that's available. And I'll be honest with you, not everyone's going to be perfect, but if you have a motor with that cooling fan cover on the outboard end of that motor, you're not going to be able to get that sensor on the end bell unless you can get your customer to modify that guard, the cooling cover, or something like that, or have a small enough sensor that you can slide in there and get it stuck on the end bell, and everybody will scream and holler about that. But for 30 years, I collected data with a 2-pole magnet on the outboard end of a motor on those cooling fans, the fins on the motor. They were on the stator. Was it perfect? No. Did it give me good repeatable data? Yes. And if we're using the remote sensors like we use, where we're putting the sensor on and leaving it in the same location, one of the biggest problems you have with the route-based data system is not getting that sensor in the exact same location from reading to reading, unless you did what I did and I marked every location. And so we eliminate that thing. And then I go out with the install guys and show them, here's the load zone on the bearing. We want to get as close to the load zone as we can. Here's our XYZ. We want to orientate it the correct way. We don't want to be off 20 degrees or 30 degrees on this one and then perfect on the next one. We'd like to, if it's all possible, to have everything, say, in the vertical direction all the way across the machine. So if I've got my outboard in the vertical of the motor, the inboard in the vertical on the motor, then I'd like to get my gearbox or pump, whatever, in the vertical position there, so on through the drivetrain and stuff. So that's been really exciting. Some of the young guys I'm working with, they're excited about this. They've when they see something, you have a lot of these aha moments with them in the field. They never understood what they were doing, as far as they understood where they were mounting the sensors and stuff like that, but they didn't understand the effect that mounting that sensor there gave the analyst that's back, with remote analysis that's going on all over today. They didn't understand how that placement of that sensor affected what those guys were looking at, and so that those guys could tie the two sensors together, So that's been really exciting. And I mean, I got a shameless plug for weights, I guess, is the fact that these guys have looked at it and said, we're not so concerned about Mark creating billable hours and making income for us. We're going to invest in his time to educate these other people, so they've seen where there's the payback for them. They get their people educated. We build a strong foundation for those younger guys coming into the industry, so that, I explain to them your career path. What do you want to do after you learn how to install sensors and stuff, and work your way up into an analyst position or a manager or director's position? So we're kind of setting those guys up for long-term success, and Waits is invested in their employees, by wrapping up my salary into what I'm doing for these guys to educate them. So it's a win-win for us. And it's also a win for the customer, because the customer is getting ensured that he has better educated people. They've got better directors coming in, the guys that are the install managers and stuff. Those guys, can spread the knowledge once I am and give it to those guys. Then that helps those guys expand the knowledge with the younger guys coming into their teams and stuff. And then we've got a channel, we call it Sensor Placement in Slack. So when these guys are out in the field and they have questions about, hey, this is something I haven't seen before, can somebody tell me exactly where I should install the sensor, or this is the location that I think is available? So we have that continuous commitment. We've got, 20 guys that monitor that Slack channel, so anytime it pops up, day or night, these guys have a resource that's at their beckoning on their phone to get on there and get some information and make sure they're doing things in the correct way.
Yeah. So, and really, like I was saying earlier, how this impacts the actual customer is important. And I'm kind of assuming, maybe you can confirm for me, that they get some education along the way about what they actually have now, what they should be looking for when your teams are not on site, and how they can maybe even periodically verify that placement is still where it was supposed to be. Because that's another thing with sensors. You have a couple of things going on, like batteries can get weak, right? And typically with the technology that's out there now, batteries tend to last a much longer time than they used to. However, I'm wondering, because I don't know a ton about it, right? I can say some words, but don't know what's really behind them. So I want to ask you, do the customers in their plant environments or wherever it is that these sensors are located, do they get trained on how to kind of check on and make sure those sensors are still in proper operating conditions so that you don't have to continually go on site and bill them?
Yeah, what we do is we've got that's built into our dashboard that monitors the sensor health. So if it's not communicating, we get information. If the battery's getting low, we get information. You know, maybe the battery's at 25%. So we reach out to the customer, say this battery's getting low. We need to set up a PM to change that battery for you. Um, Actually, I'm in the process right now of also working with some of our customers to help them understand when we go in and we ask them for the tooth counts that are on their sprocket on the in or on the output of their drive, why we need those number of teeth and how we tie it into the vibration we're seeing. We talk to them about it. I help educate those guys about, you know, the importance of us knowing what kind of coupling is on this machine. Is it a grid coupling? Is it a gear coupling? Is it like a Lovejoy jaw coupling? Is it the Omega bun style coupling? And explain to those guys the failure modes that are related to these different components in your machine. And that's how we monitor them. But we need to know the components that are in the machine so we get the correct failure modes mapped to them. I've had some really good feedback when I've sat on sites with reliability people at the customer site and help them understand what I call vibration 101.
Yeah.
It's not about formulas or anything else. It's just basic knowledge and basic understanding. You know, if I see a high 2 times across your coupling, you got misalignment. You know, if I show them talk about gear mesh frequencies in a gearbox and how we use that information, looseness and things like that. So we're getting good feedback every time I have one of these sessions with a customer. You always get really good feedback because either they don't know or no one has ever sat down and tried to explain anything to their level. You know, they're not, a lot of the guys I deal with are the guys on the floor. So they're not engineers, they're not mathematicians and stuff like that. All they know is somebody's come in here and put this little thing on my machine and they're going to tell me something's wrong with it. And I was the same way, you know, when I was in maintenance, there's nothing wrong with that motor. There's nothing wrong with that gearbox. It's running fine. It sounds great. You tell me to change it out. Well, I'll change it out, but I'm going to tear that thing apart so I can tell that idiot with that little black box walking around here, there was nothing wrong with this and you wasted my day. And I'd pull it apart and it's like, son of a buck, how'd he know that that bearing was bad or that gear was bad and stuff? It just amazed me, and that's how I got into what I'm doing today.
Yeah. Was there a time, like, you know, however far back you go, like, was there a time when that kind of viewpoint, like, okay, they're telling me something's wrong, I'm going to tear this apart and I'm going to show them that this was a false positive, false negative, whatever. Was there a time in the industry where that was more common? And is it still a problem at a lot of the companies out there that are, you know, selling you a little sensor that just doesn't have the right technology or knowledge behind it to get the proper anomalies you're trying to detect?
Yeah, there was. I mean, when I got started, I was a planner. The planner back, like I say, last century. Um, it was it was a different role. It was an additional duty to being a mechanic, you know. So I was able to job kit and stuff. And the reason I became a planner was my foreman came up and said, "Hey, we got an opening on the north end for a planner." And it's like, yeah, you got some older guys up there. They should probably do it. He's like, you're always bitching about the job plans when you go to these PMs. Here's your chance to fix that. And that's how I got in there, you know. So you'd get the gold guy that was there, Bobby, that taught me. He'd come around with his box and he'd be taking readings and stuff. And he'd tell me something's wrong. And it's like, no, it's not. Like I said, I'd tear it apart to find out, yeah, he was right. You know, and then we'd tear stuff apart sometimes and it wasn't quite as bad as what we thought it was. You know, so it could have ran until our July shutdown or something instead of taking it down, you know, like over, we'll say over Memorial Day shutdown and working our butts off because we only got a 3-day window with the plant being down, you know. And but his whole thing was, that is the information you need to feed back to me so that I can adjust my alarms and stuff to make sure that we're making timely calls. You know,
Yeah.
I was at a facility before I ended up where I'm at now that they had an outside contractor that was doing the vibration rounds and stuff for them. And I kept telling him that your setups are wrong and stuff like that. But he had several calls out. One was a pump that didn't have any bearings in it. It was a mag pump. But he kept saying there's bearing issues in it. This was a $24,000 pump. We finally changed the thing out. I took it apart. It ended up being a dust and clean. The thing wasn't that bad. It could have ran for a long, long time. You know, in another instance, he was telling us we had bad bearings in a pump, but he had the RPM set up for the pump incorrectly based on the motor speed instead of coming through the gearbox. And so his data was showing set if that pump was actually running at 1800 RPM, it was showing what looked like a bearing defect. But when you adjusted the speeds, so that pump was set at 359 RPM. It actually ended up being related. It was a Viking pump, so it had 11 pulses in the thing for the gear and the star in it. But it was actually what he was calling a bearing defect was actually the pump pulses from the normal operation of the pump.
Wow. So that
Go ahead.
that is the kind of thing that I think a lot of us are always concerned about when we look at this really wide industry, and it's so difficult for customers, for clients out there to know what they're getting into. And I'm not here to sling mud.
Right.
I'm more of a, let's all figure out how to be better, and like even learning from one another if we're competitors about where and how these settings can go wrong, and what are these 3 extra steps you could add to your own toolkit, even if you're a consultant doing a walk down, to improve the delivery of what you're doing for that client, because that's what matters most. Are there a lot of people out there that really just don't know, but they insist that they know? Like they're just I don't know if it's an ego thing or whatever the heck it might be, but what how do you get the aha moment with those individuals, kind of like what you do with these young bucks coming up, guys or gals, whatever, right, that are on site and they're learning from you? How do we do that with our, maybe we'll call them brethren and other people in industry? What can cause that aha moment where they can kind of let down and go, maybe start seeing it? What do you think works for that? Do you have a strategy?
Well, I think it really comes back to the individual you're talking about, or talking with, because there's a lot of people that've got a lot of money and time invested in AI and machine learning, the 2 new hype words and stuff. And they're trying to do it without the human element. What we do right now is we have our algorithms and we run them. And when we see anomalies and changes, then it's pushed off to an actual person. Then that person starts looking at the data, and then if they have questions, they reach out to the site. Because we're not on the site. Back in the day when I was doing it, if I seen something, I could go out to the machine and play around with it, take additional readings, look, listen, and feel and stuff. I don't have that opportunity today. So that's where the communication comes in. And I talk to a lot of people about this. If you're going to develop a reliable program and do it remotely with these sensors, that we have to have 2-way communications. I can narrow your laundry list down of this vibration pattern, usually is related to 50 different things. But if you give me the component information of your machine, we know the correct speeds, we know operating parameters and stuff. Is this something that cycle loads? Is this something that's typically steady state? Things like that. Then we can narrow that list down to 2 or 3 things and then reach out to you. And then you do a little more inspection and, but some of it's not really needed. If I'm seeing a high vibration in the vertical direction, typically that's something's come loose on your machine, like an anchor bolt or something like that. So that's where my vibrations come in. So we start the discussion that way. But there's a lot of people that are into this AI really heavy, with the idea that I can replace that guy that's been walking around that plant, or I can replace that vibration analyst with my computer modeling program. And over the years, I've seen a lot of those that can kind of come close, but they're not there yet. And that's where the human element, I think, comes in. And that's where I always tell people you need to develop that two-way communication. And then I've talked to a lot of people about the fact that you're changing from a route based procedure where you've got a person that's at that facility or at that machine, look, listen, and feeling. So when you take those senses out of it, all I've got is data to work with. So how do we replace that look, listen, and feel senses? We got to do that with somebody on site at times. And I haven't seen an AI program or an ML program yet, that I've seen that is to the point I would trust everything that's spitting out, unless I've been through a couple failures of that particular machine and it's failed. Say I've got a coupling element and I've got a really good case study on a Solar air compressor. When I would start seeing an increase in the gear mesh frequency on it, that compressor had a Omega bun style coupling on it. And when that thing would start tearing in the very early stages, it would chatter those gears a little bit. Well, after it's happened, then this was back before AI. But when I would see that stuff increase, the first thing I did was, when it's down, you couldn't see the guard or anything like that when it was running for safety reasons. So when that thing went down, you'd tell them that, hey, my gear mesh frequency is coming up. I'm seeing side bands. Let's look at that coupling. And now I know what the failure mode is. I know what the failure patterns are. So when that starts producing itself again, 99% of the time, as soon as I see that pattern and I see this stuff developing, because we've had it happen, I don't really need to go look at it. I can pretty confidently say you guys need to inspect that coupling element and replace it.
Interesting. Sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on.
No, I'm done.
So as you're describing this, and I'm kind of a bit of an AI skeptic, and what I mean by that is I think machine learning, because that's what it really is certainly valuable. It's not new. And
right.
I make fun of the shiny stuff and let's slap AI on everything we got and all that. Let's take that off the table for a second. And the way you were describing that, I was thinking about cars, like kind of like hot rods or whatever. And there's this idea, right? There are plenty of people that are way more gearhead, motorhead guys than I am, but I was always interested in it and kind of taking it in kind of a casual, but maybe just a touch beyond casual, right? Yep. So here's an example. I love Corvettes. I love all cars, like pretty much. There's some I don't like, but if we think about, we used to make fun of like dummy lights, because they don't tell you much, and they actually tell you when you need to bring something in for service, which is unfortunate, because if you were going a little bit more old school and watching temperature gauges or oil pressure gauges or things like that, now you get some actual indicators that tell you, all right, I shouldn't drive this right now. I should let it cool down and I should go look at some stuff. I should check some fluid levels. I should look for areas of leakage or pressure, right? A lot of work, right? But guys and gals that have their hot rods, they have no problem with that. Show me something that gives me a breadcrumb and a clue, and I'm going to stop and I'm going to go do the right thing. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is on Labor Day this week, they had the NHRA Nationals. And you pay attention to a lot of this stuff, and then somebody comes out of the gate and the tires break loose, or the mill just shuts down. And now they can't run their race, and maybe that was the finals or the semifinals. When we look at that, because when you drive a vehicle and you're kind of in tune, it follows more of your philosophy. And I'm thinking of like machine whisperers and people that can just feel things and they can hear things. They don't even need the gauges.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the hot rodders that could hand and ear tune, maybe with their hand on the car when they're turning a distributor. And
Yep.
the reason I'm spinning out on this is it's that particular element that we're all just not wanting to go away yet,
Right.
because we don't feel confident in what these programmatic systems can actually do. So you just described what you were describing was really more around, once I've seen it and I understand what it is, now I can connect that to the patterns and understand that this is a valuable indicator. Is it was
Yeah.
my analogy close enough to kind of explain what you're talking about?
No, that's perfect. And that's what I've always said. I started following the AI and the wireless sensors and stuff back in 2016. It really intrigued me. But I was also brought up with, when I built my machines in my databases, I had the bearing information, the tooth counts and stuff. So I knew all those frequencies. And I've talked about it before. Vibration isn't that difficult. It's all about knowing your numbers. And if you have that foundational element, and I'm a firm believer in foundational elements, which is component information and all those frequencies, and you plug that stuff in my eyes, if we'll say, the the sprocket tooth count on this gearbox, that on the output side, maybe that's, we'll say, 1600 CPM. If I know what that frequency is, when I see 1600 CPM and harmonics of that, then I can say that that frequency is not changing. And what I've always said with the vibration in the AI today, and people are skipping the foundational element to get the information of the bearings, the gear tooth counts and stuff. Where I eventually want to see this go is that computer and that AI is going to tell me that 80% of the vibration energy in this spectrum is related to this bearing frequency and its harmonics. But if I don't have that bearing information, those frequencies in there, there's no way I can pull that out. And what I say, people tell me that, well, that's going to take a supercomputer, or I'm not going to be able to get this information. Well, it's always difficult, but instead of saying I can't do it, let's discuss how we can do it. Because when I look at the frequencies in that spectrum, and maybe that spectrum has 200 different frequencies in it, to me, it's no different than the stock exchange. If you watch that ticker go across the stock exchange, every one of those symbols for each different company is in there. So we'll call those the frequencies of your gearbox or your motor or whatever. And at any time you want to, you can pull up the sticker or that ticker, and the people running the New York Stock Exchange can tell you how much that stock has sold for, how much it hasn't sold for, what's the price range it's been running at any one time. And if I can track those numbers and watch for those changes, why can't I apply the same type of analogy to all my different frequencies as it spits out? Because it's just a number, you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at with this stuff, if that makes sense.
I think it does. And I think we want to be mindful not to pile on too much info, because even for me, I have to take a lot of this in and try to process it. And anybody
Right.
that watches this will see that sometimes I gloss over. This happens to me also when I'm recording with or having all these awesome conversations with Howard Penrose, Motor
Right.
Doc,
Right.
and a
Right.
lot of other, people. I did mention to you before, and I'm going to shout it out right here, that Brian Bieski wanted me to say hi to you, because Brian and I talk a lot about these concepts of the basics, the basic fundamentals, and those just can't and should not go away. And a lot of people out there think there's easy buttons and ways to shortcut it. And what we're trying to say, I think, is not shortcut it, but to maybe save a little time to still better leverage those human interactions, the humans that are going to be the machine whisperers, that are going to actually interpret it, and we can make that better. So they're supposed to go kind of side by side and hand in
Right.
hand. This isn't about eliminating jobs.
Right.
You're not going to create knowledge bases that take away, or should I say replace, that individual that sees and feels something and hears something that AI and machine learning just can't yet do. Doesn't mean we won't get there, but there's
Right.
still going to be people along for the ride. And tribal knowledge is critically important, and we need to capture it and we need to convey it in the right context and have it available. Stop ignoring it, people. So here we're gonna wrap this one. But I want to thank you for being on CMMS Radio. I got to do one more thing if you're up for it. I know we did this previously, but we didn't get to release the episode. Would you like to do the fun question segment on CMMS Radio?
Sure.
All right. These are easy breezy. You've heard them before, folks. Mark and I did a recording previously earlier this year, and it had some technical issues. So we're going to do the fun question segment. No wrong answers here. This is just a little fun for us. First one. What is your favorite music?
My favorite music is probably, I guess I go back to stuff like old school stuff like Yes, The Doors, Little Pink Floyd, Molly Hatchet. I love Molly Hatchet's album covers.
Cool.
And the artwork, that's the one thing I miss about music today. You don't have the artwork, that's on the covers and stuff.
All right. Good one. Second fun question. What is your favorite sport or hobby? And on sport, it doesn't necessarily have to be one that you play or used to play, but do you have a favorite sport or hobby?
I used to love water skiing when I was younger and stuff. We did a lot of stupid stuff like trying to pull a wakeboard at 40 miles an hour and couldn't figure out why it wasn't working like it does on TV until we got somebody that knew what they were doing. And we started pulling them and he was doing good. And then we started increasing the speed and he'd let go. And it's like, well, what's wrong? He says, these things are built to run like about 15 miles an hour. You don't have to show me how fast the boat goes.
Yeah. That's funny. I was for some reason thinking of what we used to call skitching. We would snag a bumper in the wintertime and try to ride a car or a bus. And it's so dumb. I mean, it's crazy, but you got to try. At least you're in the water. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the big one, and no wrong answers. What is your philosophy, perspective, opinion, anything at all when it comes to this concept of work-life balance? Is it a thing? Is it not? What do you think?
I think it is. Early on in my career, I worked, crane rental outfits. I worked maintenance and things like that. Worked a lot of 60-hour weeks was standard all the way up to 112-hour weeks. But I missed a lot with my kids growing up. But because of the hours I put in, it allowed my wife to stay home with them. So we didn't have the dual income, but we didn't make as much money because of that. But the kids had a mom that was sitting home with them and stuff. So you kind of trade off that way. Now, today, when I talk to kids today that are on the road, that are just getting their families going and stuff, and they get frustrated with being gone, it's like, hey, whatever you got to do, you're never going to replace that time with your kids. If you got to find a different job or something to get off the road, my advice to you is to do it, because you're going to miss out on stuff that you'll never, ever be able to replace. So for me, that's part of work-life balance. I've been fortunate in my career that I've enjoyed my work. So when I'm going to work, it's not like I'm not getting up and saying, God, I got to go to work. A lot of the times I was getting up and it's like, I get to go to work. I get to work on this stuff. I get to enjoy what it's doing. I've worked with people that, hey, I got this great job. I make really good money, but I hate every day that I'm sitting in this office or doing this job. I couldn't do that. So I'm my concept is I've never worked a day in my life because I've enjoyed what I'm doing. I've had good times and I've had bad times, but the good times far outweigh the bad times because I like what I'm doing. So to me, it's like the money's nice, but first focus on something you want to do and see if you can make a career. You may not become, Mark Zuckerberg or somebody like that with endless amounts of money, but make a living. And that's what I tell my kids, make a living doing what you enjoy if it's at all possible. If not, make enough money to be able to afford to do the things that you really enjoy when you have that free time, and make sure you make time for yourself to do that free stuff or the stuff you enjoy if you hate your job. That's kind of my philosophy.
Hey, and that's why there's no wrong answers, because this helps somebody, whether they agree or disagree isn't why we're doing it. We're just looking to get some good, fun, kind of insightful information. And when we get to hear it from a real pro that's been there, been in the trenches, and is still doing it, I think it matters, man. Mark Kingkade, thank you so much for being here with me on CMMS Radio, my friend.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I love talking to you every time we get a chance.
Thank you. It's my honor, man, and I can't wait until the next time I see you out on the circuit somewhere. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
You got it.
Bye.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.